My name's Chris Bacon, and we welcome you to this week's session of our Leadership Lab, all about analytics. I know it's cold. We've got the heat on, so hopefully it won't. Hopefully everybody will get warmed up quickly, and I know our speaker will heat up the room today. So I'm really fortunate, and I am honored in a way to introduce our professor this morning. So Joe Abruzzo, Joe and I go back a long ways. We were just trading stories earlier this morning about the number of places that we have intercepted each other in our careers. So I'm going to out him a little bit in the sense that Joe started his career 36 years ago, and he's letting me say that. But look, we're getting the benefit of those 3 decades plus of experience today because Joe was really a pioneer in the media business when it comes to the use of analytics, marketing models to help clients optimize their media planning. So we're really lucky today. Joe is going to share with us what I call hooked on analytics, and how smart media planners are using smart analytics to help optimize their media plans. And as I said, Joe's been doing this ever since he started his career in the early 80s at NWA Air, which I can't remember now what Air is part of.
Air is now part of Saatchi & Saatchi.
And from Air, went to MEC, what used to be part of Y&R, and has been at Havas for almost 10 years, right? Is it? Yeah, for almost 10 years now, and is currently EVP and Chief Exploration Officer at Havas. And look, Joe has been not only involved in media planning for all this time, but he's done and has been a friend of the industry as well. And serves on the CRE, the Council of Research Excellence, and leads the CRE's work in media consumption. So we can't do any better than Joe Abruzzo today. So please join me in welcoming him to our stage. Joe?
Thank you. Okay. The whole idea of analytics, it seems to take on a lot of different definitions. We've got a whole department back at Havas Media that does analytics, and it's frankly it's just a step above reporting, for example, digital reporting. And then the other end of analytics, you can have some really serious statistical methods. So I'm going to talk about some of those methods. I'm going to focus on what takes place in the world of media planning today. And it's not all, it's not all about regression analysis, et cetera. It's about making decisions. Let's talk about this. I'm going to talk about what clients expect, key questions to be answered during the media planning process. We'll touch upon data sources, systems, methodologies that provide insight to making difficult decisions. There are difficult decisions. Along the way, let's keep this informal. If you have anything to add to this, please let me know. Raise your hand or just pipe up, and we'll go there. So this is something I usually tell people who just got into the industry and they want to know, like, who are these client guys? Well, first, clients expect their agents to be knowledgeable about their business. It's not just about getting the target audience and making a buy. It's like they expect me to know how my business works. They expect the agency to provide guidance on how to best reach and engage target customers. Okay, it's not just about, and it usually deals with, it's channel agnostic, reaching people at the right place in the right time. They expect their agency to be able to adjust quickly to changing market conditions and emerging opportunities. So, they don't want somebody who's just like a television agency. They want people that are going to be knowledgeable about what's new in digital, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then clients expect feedback on investment performance. Did they get what they paid for and the resulting business performance? Okay? So that's pretty much, and depending on where you sit in the organization, you're going to be closer to some of the major issues. If you're an assistant media planner, you're going to be doing flowcharts, and you're going to be working with other more senior people to develop what the agency has to deliver. So most agencies have what they call is it's a communication planning process. And the communication planning process usually has a lot of questions that you have to answer before you can actually develop a plan. So it's like usually you go through an exploration and analysis stage, which would include a market analysis, brand analysis, and competitive. And it would also include data trends, audits, could include focus groups, primary research, anthropological studies, and then day in the life studies. So, for example, when you're talking about market analysis and brand analysis, there are a lot of sources out there. There's things like Mintel and Data Monitor that you can look at to find out, where a market's going. You can look at brand analysis. Would include things like, again, Mintel could tell you, how is the category structured, who's participating in which part of the category. Competitive, a lot of people think competitive is just sort of like knowing about who's spending what. Does anybody here work with competitive data? Okay, competitive data, competitive is about, it's as important as understanding the target consumer. And how is the target consumer making decisions across brands? If you consume cereal, the chances are you don't eat the same cereal every day for the entire year. You switch around, and understanding that switching process is an important part of defining who you compete with. Day in the life studies are important. How do I reach people at different times of day? There's something called Media in Mind. It's a recent entry into the U.S. ad industry. It was originated in the UK, and it's sort of like it's a pretty sophisticated diary of how people use different channels by time of day, by day of week. There are some other versions. There is something that MRI does. MRI is a company that fields surveys about product and media consumption, and they also ask you to fill out a questionnaire saying, what did you do yesterday? Most of these companies look at what did you do yesterday, because that is what people are most easily able to reconstruct. Okay. So once you go through this process, you create a synthesis, which results in understanding of the target audience and what the media plan has to accomplish. And you go into budget development, channel selection, and allocation. When I talk about channel, I'm talking about, are we going to use print? Are we going to use radio? Are we going to use display, which is, digital display or digital video? We're going to use mobile. Very important. And then scheduling. Get into tactical planning, which includes vehicle selection. So when we talk about the difference between channels and vehicles is, you can say a channel would be magazines, a vehicle could be Time Magazine. Okay. Do your buying, and then there's diagnostics, stewardship, and media spending returns. So those are the stages. Okay. Click. Okay. So there are always questions, and these are questions that I've been asking myself most of my career. And it's just sort of like when you get a new client, how do you prepare to work with this client? You want to understand the market size. How large is it? Is the market growing? If the market's not growing, that means you're in a share fight, and there's a lot to do with what your objectives should be. What about market segmentation? Is it a one-size-fits-all market? And that's something that happened in the past, but now markets tend to be very highly segmented, depending on the category. Or are there different product types to fit different preferences? How do brands participate within key market segments? Okay. How do brands align with customer target groups? How are brands positioning themselves? What differentiates one brand from another? Now, the whole idea of positioning is sort of interesting because when you work in an ad agency, there is actually a positioning statement that said, to the target audience, my brand is, participates in this category, and the thing that makes it important is X. And there are actually statements that say, this is my positioning statement. The other, a broader definition is, how do people think about my brand? Okay, I'm going to give you an example of the latter. I didn't, it's not about positioning today, but I could provide you with a positioning statement if you'd like, Chris.
Question?
Yes, sure.
How many categories are left that are sort of one size fits all in terms of segmentation? Think about that.
A one size fits all category.
It would be hard to come up with one.
Nothing comes to mind. I mean, this is something that was invented by Sloan, Sloan is the head, I guess he started GM, is he? Yeah. And he's the guy that invented segmentation, a different car for different people types. And before that, Henry Ford everybody's going to have the same car. And it goes back pretty far, and I'm thinking that in terms of, there's been a drive to segment markets to better fit the needs of different customer groups. And in the process of doing that, people have less of a need to settle for the type of product that they need. Yeah. Yes.
Good question. The segmentation, positioning, targeting exercise should be done in-house in the company by the marketing team, right? So
Yeah.
where does the ad research, and is it for those who don't do it, or this is supplementary research?
The developing the positioning statement is usually something that's done jointly between the company and the ad agency. And the media department, the media agency doesn't usually get involved in developing the positioning. I'm going to take you through some examples. One example of how brands are positioned, but it's usually something that should be developed with the agency, because they tend to be specialists in agencies who are really have an understanding of how to field positioning research. They're fielding positioning research every day, and they're more accomplished at with that kind of an assignment. Yeah. Yes.
I'm not in touch with media buys, but to what extent, how granular can you get with your media buys now? Because it was, for years, decades, just a couple of demographics, right? Age, gender, and so on. So is it more, is the media positioning targeting more, are you able to do it more granularly now?
Yeah, you can reach people based on their product usage. Now we're talking about addressable media, and there is a limitation to your ability to reach individual households. You still can't reach individual persons. There is a limitation to your ability to direct a different message to a different household. I'd say it's about 40 million households in the United States. So you would have something like DirecTV, which is a satellite company, Dish Network, satellite, Cablevision, terrestrial, cable, and then Comcast is doing some addressability of its its on-demand product. Other than that, the game you're playing is you're looking at composition. So in the world of media, when you're looking at properties, different kinds of, I called it vehicles before, you have to look at the composition of the audience. Composition would say, of the total people who watch this program, what percentage are in my target audience? Okay, there are some cases where the composition would be very high. So, for example, if you look at something on the Travel Channel and your product is people who are likely to want to take a cruise, your composition is going to be much higher than a program on, primetime program on CBS, for example. Because those people are already in a traveling mindset. Okay, so it's a composite. The answer to your question is it's a composition game. we're going to talk about that in a while. I'm going to talk about a few examples, and I'll talk about remind me to talk about simulmedia.
Simulmedia.
Okay, thanks. Okay, thanks. I think we're going to get through this today. Okay, this is just, I know you're all getting copies of this presentation, and this is just something I took out of a presentation that I have. It's a targeting workshop, and it's just target customer, who do we want to talk to? These are some of the considerations, which markets has the client sought to develop and with how much success? Having an understanding of where's this client coming from? You just can't walk in, take on a new client, and suddenly tell him he's got to change everything he's doing. You sort of have to understand where he's been before. Segments offering the best buying potential versus an undifferentiated target group. So that deals with segmentation. And the targets should be accurate. Usually you want to at least talk about attitudes, behaviors, and characteristics. Good, easy way to remember that is ABC. Okay. These are some common ways of defining target audiences. You got, demographic profiling has been around forever, as long as we could measure age, gender, income, etc. Purchase usage behavior is important. Heavy users of a category, loyal users of my brand. People who never buy your brand have a very low likelihood of buying it this week or next week. Life stage segments are important, especially if you're dealing with diapers, for example. Moms with kids under 3 years. Lifestyle, which would be something like mindset segments, active people, healthy people. And it's easy to profile these types of people in research like MRI, Simmons. They all have batteries that talk about people's attitudes toward life. Okay? There are syndicated segmentations, and then there's brand switching analysis to understand market structure. This is something that's sort of out there, and not every agency or client does this. But there are lots of debates. So, for example, if you're Coca-Cola, and I've got Diet Coke and regular Coke, what's the sort, who am I competing? Is each brand competing for the same consumer? Some people would say there are only people that consume Diet, and those are the people that Diet Coke is competing for. And there are people that only consume regular Coke, and those are the people that regular Coke is, regular cola, and those are the people that regular Coke is competing for. And then there are some people there are some arguments that say no, people switch within the brand, so people stay within Coca-Cola, people stay within Pepsi-Cola. And that's a big debate, and this kind of analysis, which is a little, it's sort of sophisticated, but it gets to the crux of who is my competition, okay? And then finally, target groups should be accessible through media vehicle selection. Our clients come to us all the time with segmentations that don't deal with specific media behavior. They talk about these segments are looking for these benefits, et cetera, but they don't do a good job of dealing with the media side. And I'm going to explain to you how we can get around that. Okay, one more time.
Can you elaborate on the parenthetic remark there about excluding people?
Yeah, that gets back to the idea of composition. So if you can't address individuals, you're addressing a group of people who consume a certain media type or a certain program or a certain magazine. Whenever you do that, you're inevitably going to there's going to be some waste, and the waste is going to involve people who are not in your target audience. And what you want to do is you want to minimize your reach against that group. So if you can maximize your reach, bless you, if you can maximize the reach against the people that are in your target audience, you've got a much more efficient buy. Okay? Got it? Okay.
Yeah, so is that like an optimization process?
Yeah, it's sort of an optimization process. It's target optimization. Yeah. Target. You do optimization to maximize your targeting efficiency. Yeah.
So would you build an algorithm against that?
You could. Yeah. It's easy to do. I've done it. It's easy to do. I'm gonna take you through some examples of how that's done, some sophisticated ways and how that's being done today. Okay.
Can you give us an example of syndicated segmentation?
Yes, I can. There you go. Oops.
Wait,
Oops.
wait. David, can you help?
Take me too forward.
Hold on. Yeah, I think you did. Hold on.
One more. Okay,
There we
this
go.
one. Okay, so there are. I'll tell you. There are 3 syndicated segmentations. What they normally do is they cluster like households, mainly households. Okay, it could be based on stage in life stage. It could be based on where you live. I live in a suburban community. Someone else lives in an urban community. It could be based on the homogeneity versus the heterogeneity of my neighborhood. It could be a heterogeneous neighborhood. Homogeneous neighborhood could deal with my educational level. Okay, so this is an example of Mosaic. There's a company called Simmons. Simmons was just acquired by Symphony Advanced Media. They have a segmentation called Mosaic. There are about 75 of these segments, and they roll the segments up into segment groupings. Okay, and what you can do is you can take media research, marketing research data, and if it's coded with Mosaic clusters, you can tabulate which types of households are using my product or my competitors' products. So this is a way of using a syndicated segmentation. Okay. So this is Mosaic. And next one. Okay, I just went too far. Okay. So this is Nielsen's Prism segmentation. These are the groupings. There are 15 or 16 groupings. This is a new grouping here. This didn't exist a few years ago. So you've got urban grouping, upper income, urban grouping, middle income, urban grouping, lower income. Same thing with suburbs, elite suburbs, affluentials is the elite suburbs, middle income. 4 different groups. This is the lower income group. Same thing with cities, second cities. And you've got high income to low income. Then you've got towns, which is sort of like this is your rural group, okay? Okay. And what you really want to do is try to understand, where is the core of my business, okay? Sometimes you can read it by brand. Sometimes you're limited to looking at category usage. So this is an example. Whoops. Let's go back. Go back. Okay, so this is an example using the Prism cluster groupings. It's something I did a couple of years ago. I was looking at people who buy stock. They do stock transactions. People who did 5 or more stock transactions in the past 12 months. So again, I've got this is your education and affluence dimension in this case, and then you've got your population density dimension. So you've got indices within each box. So this is sort of an indication of the likelihood of encountering someone who made 5 or more stock transactions in the last 12 months. And you can see the big numbers are in the top row. There's no surprise that high-income people are doing stock trades. But you also have some other groups here, the second city centers, the affluents. So what you can actually do is you can actually look at what are the media types that you can use to reach these people. And this doesn't seem to be an opportunity for this business, okay? But what you can do is you can focus in on how do I reach landed gentry, second city society, elite suburbs, etc. Okay? Does everyone understand this process that I just went through? You can do this with, if you subscribe to the segmentation, you can both Simmons and MRI will append this segmentation to the regular database that you would use to analyze consumer behavior.
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Sure.
What are targeting behaviours? What was your ABC? Sorry, attitudes, behaviours,
characteristics.
Characteristics.
So characteristics would be the age, sex.
What does this give you? What do these syndicated ones give you in order to target?
Okay.
What kind of ABCs.
Okay. So it's going to be characteristics. It's going to be characteristics. It's going to be information about how the household. It's not going to tell me about behavior. This tells me about behavior because I overlaid behavior on the segmentation.
With bespoke research.
Well, you can do it. There are some ways to do it with syndicated research.
Okay.
Yeah. You can also tabulate attitudes using both MRI and Simmons. Simmons goes pretty deep with its attitudinal batteries. They probably have over 100 attitudes that you can take a look at. When you work in an agency, it's usually the margins are very thin, and unless the client's willing to pick up the cost of a primary research study, you'd probably try to get as much as you can out of the syndicated data. Okay, does that help?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. So we were talking about positioning before, and I said there's a positioning statement, but there's also the way people think about brands, and this is thinking about magazines not as media but as brands. Does that work? Okay. Now I'm going to talk about before the positioning. Clients frequently field their own studies, their own segmentation studies, and as I mentioned before, very often, what comes out of the segmentation study has very little to do with media, or it's very gross in terms of these people they're heavy users of television, not that useful. So what you can do is you can take a segmentation, and this is a real case. We took an allergy segmentation. There were allergy sufferers split into 5 segments, and we created research to create hooks, to fuse the segmentation research into the MRI study of the American consumer. So based on the research that we were able to field, the research had information about both questions that were asked in the allergy segmentation, and usually you can boil it down to like 5 questions that you would use to assign people to different segments. And then there are hooks that you can use, such as media usage, category usage, etc., to align to assign people within the MRI study to each of the 5 segments. So of course, everybody that we looked at had to be an allergy sufferer. So once we identified the allergy sufferer, we were able to assign them to each of the 5 segments. This is something we did working with suppliers. This was an analysis that was conducted by MRI, working with MRI. Not expensive, and it's a really great way to let the client know that you're extending the value of their investment, which is something they really want to know. They really want to feel good about the investments they've made. And this is a really great way to extend their investment. Any questions about this process? Yes?
Have you ever done a recontact study for MRI?
Yeah, we've done that. This was a case where we fielded MRI fielded a study. This was not a recontact study, but we have done recontact studies where we're able to recontact people who were already in the panel. And it tends to be concern about recontact studies is they take a long time, because like MRI will field a recon. They like to try to field. They'll say you a page, and they can insert a page in their questionnaire that would pertain to your question. That's one of the ways they do it. Other ways is I think you could do an ad hoc study. They tend to be on the expensive side, but it's done all the time. Questions about this? Okay. So we were talking about positioning. So this is something that was based on a brand image study, and it's about magazines. And the red type is magazines, and the black type is just personality characteristics, okay? So you've got prestigious, upper class, tough, arrogant, stylish. And then you look at, this is based on what's called correspondence analysis. This is the primary research saying, you know, how would you rate National Enquirer on factors like caring, arrogant, sensuous, glamorous, etc.? And they answer those questions for every one of the brands. And then, based on the results, you're able to develop a map, a correspondence map, okay, which gives you an idea of how do brands place relative to each other across these axes. Now, the question is, you know, where did I get sizzle versus trust and approachable versus exclusive? The answer is, you've got to look at the map. And the map is what tells you how to name the dimensions. Most important dimension is the horizontal, followed by the vertical. Usually there's usually more than 2 dimensions in an analysis. But the first 2 dimensions that come out account for most of the variation between brands. Okay. Any questions about a correspondence analysis? This would say that L and Mademoiselle are sort of, their positioning is more about, it's about style, sensuous, glamorous. Okay. You could also do this through a methodology called discriminant function analysis, which is an analysis that looks at what are the differences between brands. Okay.
Any idea how caring and arrogant are close in proximity in the lower left quadrant?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Oh,
Caring
daring.
and arrogant are close in proximity in the lower left quadrant.
Daring and arrogant, yeah. Interesting you say that. Well,
David, we're trying to get the clicker working, so.
okay, daring. You know, the data sort of defines where things are placed. So arrogant, well, I guess arrogant, you know, there must be something arrogant up here. You know, that's pulling arrogant to the left. Because if you look at top to bottom, you've got things like New Yorker, Art Digest, which I would think those are sort of on the arrogant side. But it's it's being pulled in 2 directions at the same time.
Maybe the other dimensions, the higher dimensions,
Yeah, the higher dimension may be out here somewhere. Yeah,
are up
yeah, yeah, exactly.
How do you come up with correspondence analysis? Do you guys use any tool in order to really method out like this?
So you can use correspondence analysis. There's a company, IMS is a company that is owned by Nielsen, and they provide a desktop software that allows you to access the data, okay? But if you can get your hands on the actual respondent level data, you can easily do a correspondence analysis using SPSS or using SAS, okay? Okay. I lost my clicker.
How would you then use that? So
How would I
you've
use?
got that, you see where your brand's positioned. How would you then use that information?
Well, let's say, is it working? You think it's working? Okay.
Yeah, there might be some signal interference.
Okay, fine. Okay, fine. How would you use that? Well, first of all, you want to do a situation analysis. First of all, it's sort of like the first question about doing a business analysis is a positioning analysis. Is where am I, and where do I want to be? Okay, so that sort of starts to answer that question. And what you may do is you may repeat this analysis from time to time. If you want to move your brand from here, say, closer to a different competitive brand, you may repeat this. You'll implement some new research, some new advertising, and then a year later you can repeat the study to see if you're moving in the right direction. Okay, and that's sort of the way it gets used. Yes.
Let me just add, so this was something that we used to use a lot when I was at Gallo because, wine brands have their own unique personalities. And so one of the things that we would do is take a look at our individual brands, and we knew from the marketplace which were growing, which were shrinking. So we'd say, oh, wait a minute, there's a brand called Barefoot that's growing really rapidly, which fortunately was ours. and we'd say, well, where is it positioned? And we'd use a correspondence map because it would allow us to understand how people, the place that that brand held in people's minds. So Barefoot was all about fun and approachable. So what happened is that as Barefoot started growing in the marketplace and taking more market share, and others started recognizing that Barefoot was associated with fun and approachable, you got a lot of copycats coming in talking about fun and approachable. As a matter of fact, there was one that went so far as to call itself Flip Flop. Okay, so this is one of those really powerful tools, not just in media planning, but in also brand dynamics and brand analysis. And I think one of the bits I know, Joe, that I found in working with people to help them understand, a lot of times when people look at quadrant charts like this, they think, oh, I've got to be in the upper right. That's not the case with correspondence analysis, is it?
It's not at all. In fact, when you sort of triggered a thought, and that is, you don't know where, the volume in the category, the volume opportunities can be anywhere. And it's just, so you may want to move toward the volume opportunity.
And that's one of the things that's great about a correspondence map and in looking at it in this way. It's not good or bad. This is not intended to be a judgment about what's right or what's wrong. This is how people think about your brand. This is how they think about where you live and where your competitors live. And if you then, and I won't steal all your thunder, but then you overlay it with a bunch of other stuff like Simmons and MRI, and you can get some really powerful stuff.
Right.
Quick question.
Sure.
Is this an open-ended question that's given to the survey clients, or are the characteristics predefined and then
Predefined. They're
So
predefined.
how do you define, how do you come up with these, like arrogant and daring? These are not something that you associate with a magazine off the top of your head.
Yeah, it's like brand personification is big. It's like if this brand were a person, what would they be like? And these are personality characteristics. There are various personality lists of personality characteristics, and the fact is that there probably aren't. I have 40 different personality characteristics here. There aren't 40 dimensions. A lot of these things move together. So, for example, I think I've got dynamic out here.
Sensuous and glamorous.
Sensuous and glamorous. It's just almost synonyms. Yeah. You could go through a data reduction process, and you would end up with like 5 or 6 dimensions. Okay. Data reduction is common in marketing research. Okay. So let's talk about budget, plan development, channel selection and allocation, scheduling. How much to budget for media? What are the best media channels for creating brand awareness, brand consideration, driving brand choice? What's the best budget allocation across media channels? What's the best budget allocation across brands? If you're a multi-brand company, that's about portfolio allocation. Okay. Usually clients deal with portfolio allocation, but sometimes the agencies are asked for their opinion. How to allocate across markets is always a question that the agencies have to deal with. And what's the best way to spend a budget across time? There are lots of different rules for setting budgets. It could be very basic, like the average advertising to spend ratio, advertising to sales ratio within a category is the most basic decision way to answer that question. But it can get as high, you can get as sophisticated as to say, how much do I spend to the point where my next dollar is not going to give me $1 back in sales, which is a complex question and involves statistical analysis and modeling. Does anybody know on the second one, what's the best media channels for creating brand awareness, brand consideration? That's sort of about the consumer journey, and sometimes it's referred to as a purchase funnel.
We've talked about that, yeah.
Yeah, you've talked about purchase funnels here? Okay, fine. Okay.
Yeah. No, and I think it's a really good point. I mean, I think So if folks remember Augustine's first class of this session when he talked about where are you in that purchase funnel, are you at the upper funnel or lower funnel, I think it's a really good point, Joe, about understanding what media channel will work best depending on where you are in that funnel.
Right, yeah.
So
Yeah, certain, okay. Okay.
start with the objectives. Is it going to work?
I don't know.
There we go.
There you go. Channel selection. Customer journey. Where within the customer journey is the brand most challenged? Okay. If nobody knows about your brand, the chances are you're at the top of the funnel. You're dealing with building brand awareness. Brand awareness is usually mass media, TV, print, etc. As you work your way down the funnel, that's when the digital media become increasingly important. Especially when you get to the bottom of the funnel, you want to get somebody to take action. Those media are especially important. How do media behaviors align with stages of the customer journey? The answers vary by category and brand. And then, separate from understanding how media behaviors align with stages of the customer journey, there's actually syndicated models that you can license. So this company called Point Logic, they're out of Rotterdam, and they have developed a model for recommending optimal allocations across media channels. Okay. And it's something that's used frequently. It's used in my agency. It's used in most of the other agencies I'm aware of are doing business with Point Logic. They're licensing their tools, this tool. Nielsen is in the process of developing something called Media Impact. ComScore has something called X Media, which, yes?
What was the Nielsen product called?
I think it's called Media Impact, yes. Yes, yeah. And, yes, hi.
What examples of media behaviors?
Let's see. When I am in the market for a car, the first thing I do is go to the Kiplinger's website, or I go to Kiplinger's magazine. Each year they do a car study, and I find out which of the cars they find to be best value. Okay. That's the first thing I do when I'm in the market for a car. Later on, I might go to a dealership and ask to test drive a car. I take a look at the cars, find out what they cost, test drive a car, etc. So those are my media behaviors in buying a car. Okay.
That's also your customer journey too.
That is my customer journey too. Yeah. At the beginning, I start with just, what is Kiplinger's like? It's like Kiplinger's, and then later on, as I get further along, I might take a look at what are my neighbors driving. I might ask some of my neighbors, how do you like your car? Do you like?
That's considered to be behavior, the media behavior?
Yeah.
Asking your neighbor?
Yeah. Conversations are, this media presentation is intended to be channel agnostic. And one of the things I don't talk about here is social media. But having a conversation with your neighbor is social media. Or sending him an email. It is. Yes.
Point Logic is Norwegian, I think you said. And so is the syndicated data underlying that Norwegian? Or can you-
No, it's U.S. It's U.S. based. Yeah.
It's different from one of the syndicated databases that you talked about.
Yeah. They've got their own database. Database is it's based on norms created through surveys, expert interviews, known media delivery patterns. They're very good, and their people spend good money to license this database. Media scheduling depends on a lot of things. What are the role of media channels? Seasonal demand patterns, media carryover effects, seasonal variation in media costs, and communication goals. The role of media channels is like there are some media that you intend to have continuity. They're always going to be on. Like you may always be on radio, or you may always be in print. But there may be only certain times of the year when you bring TV, into the mix. Okay. So that's what I mean by role of media channels. Seasonal demand patterns, key event periods. So there are times of the year when demand increases for certain categories. Things like jewelry, very important during the fourth quarter, for example. Key event periods, Valentine's Day for jewelry. Media carryover effects are important. It's like, as I'm scheduling, do I have to be in media every single week? Or is my ad stock going to hold up, which means people are going to continue to behave based on advertising they saw last week or the week before? Okay. Seasonal variation in media costs is something you may want to consider. You may want to heavy up when media is cheap. And then communication goals is an issue of reach and frequency. You may just want to reach your target audience so many times. So it's like, just because a time period is especially important doesn't mean you should. It's like 5 times as important as the average week. It doesn't mean you should spend 5 times as much. You may want to spend less. You may want to say, I'm only going to reach my target audience 6 times during this 4-week period. So these are the typical questions that clients really ask these questions. Flighting patterns. How many weeks should I be on? How many weeks can I be off? What levels should I advertise at? So there's sometimes people say, they burst. They say, okay, I'm going to be on 200 rating points, I'm going to be off for 2 weeks. And then there are other people that say continuity is important. John Philip Jones, Erwin Efron said, 50 GRPs a week. If you're selling grocery goods, 50 GRPs a week is really the key to continuity, to being there when the consumer is in the market. Okay, so these are 2 different ideas. One may work in one category, one may work in a different category. Can I be off air occasionally? For how long? What happens if I go off air for an extended period of time? This is a question I've been asked a lot, and the problem is very few clients go off air for an extended period of time. But what happens if you do that is their franchises, which means the people who buy their product, it tends to erode. Okay. The only way to answer that is by doing it, and the results could be devastating. So it's a hypothetical question in most cases.
Quick question. How do you determine the media carryover effects? Does it really just come down to what the brand is and how people consume that particular product?
Yeah. If your client has ever done any modeling work, like econometric modeling, that's usually something that comes out of the modeling process. Packaged goods, it's like usually a 0.5 retention, which means that half of what I did this week is going to carry over to the next week. I've seen higher carryover effects, like 0.9, so 90% is going to carry over. But I think you don't want to set your carryover effect too high, because if you're wrong, your brand could be in trouble. Okay.
Are the assumptions of Adstock sort of generic and not targetable? I mean, they're really deterministic kind of assumptions about the decay, right?
Yeah. Most of my experience has been determining ad stock through modeling. I've come across some media planning books, assumptions you can make about ad stock and carryover / decay effects. Yeah. This is a good book. If you're really interested in scheduling, Simon Broadbent went to advertise. It takes you through, it's like a 90-page book. It takes you through all the considerations of scheduling. Yes?
What is Adstock again?
Yeah, okay. So Adstock is, let's say, okay. It's a good question. Good question. Let's say I have 100 GRPs this week. Okay. 100 GRPs. A GRP is a gross rating point, okay? A gross rating point is the equivalent of reaching 100% of your target audience once. Okay. And There's a debate going back and forth between impressions versus GRPs. I can give you an article on what the debate.
That will be another class.
I'll give you an article on that. Okay. So I have 100 GRPs this week. Okay, and I know my carryover effect is 0.5. Okay, so I'm not going to advertise in the future. I know. But I know because of my decay or carryover effect, if I advertise 100% 100 GRPs this week, next week I'm going to have the equivalent of 50 GRPs. And it's not because I was on air, but it was because there was a carryover from the previous time period. Okay. And if I do that again, I end up with 25 GRPs. So I'm cutting it in half each week. Okay. Because people forget. Okay. So if I go 100, 50, 25, 12 and a half, etc. So I wish I had a flip chart, but
How do they measure GRPs? That's not by impression.
they are measured by impressions. Okay. Yeah. Okay. You're a digital person. I can take you through the arithmetic. Yeah. It's impressions per population. Yeah. It's impressions per population. The average. It's.
Visibility is
They saw it. Yeah. Mhm. Okay. So it's the sum. So Adstock is the sum of the decays. Okay. Let me just do this. I'll just draw it fast. It's quick. Can I use the blue one?
Yeah,
Okay.
please.
Okay. Okay. So retention equals. This is not working. Okay, so this is week 1. I have 100 GRPs. That's my Adstock in week 1. Week 2, I didn't do anything. So I've got, because this is 100, this is 50.
because 50% forgot.
50% forgot, exactly.
Got it.
So this is retention, 50% remembered, 50% forgot. That's the idea. The next week, it's going to be 25. The week after that, it's going to be 12.5, etc. And what it does is it goes like this. Okay. That's what the curves usually look like. You never get quite to 0. So that's what an Adstock is about. Now you can do the same arithmetic, and if I put 100 grading points in this week, my Adstock will be 125. So I go back on air. So I have 100 rating points that are happening now, plus I have carryover of 25 rating points. Got it? Okay, everyone have it? Got it? Okay, good, great. Okay, well, let's talk about tactical planning. We'll talk a little about vehicle selection. How do you choose a magazine or a TV program or a network? This is another example of correspondence analysis. And these are cruise lines. And the position of these cruise lines was defined by media data, media consumption data. So these are cable networks. Okay? So Carnival Cruise Line is a very young, skewing cruise line. People who go on that tend to be younger than all the other cruise lines. So you see things like MTV, VH1, E, Travel Channel. As you move to the left, you get older. Okay? Where you got people watching CNBC and CNN, A&E USA. And then when you look at the top, you've got things like Travel Channel. Bottom, you've got Disney, and let's see, this is cable networks. Radio formats. Did I miss things?
Can you go back to that slide? So if you're Holland America, would you focus on, what would you choose?
Well, I would know that a good places to reach my target audience are, in this area, these kinds of networks. Okay, I would probably avoid VH1, MTV. I might avoid Disney, Travel Channel. Well, I would be in the Travel Channel regardless.
In this case, Holland America has a lot of options. What does stuff thing Royal Viking do?
Yeah. Royal Viking is probably anything on the furthest to the left. Okay.
Best case scenario.
Yeah, furthest to the left. Yeah.
The dimensions are just age.
Now, dimensions. Dimension is age, and I'm gonna show you the magazines. The magazines they become more obvious. So this is your radio formats. So you've got easy listening, older people, progressive rock, younger people, adult contemporary toward the top.
How do you explain the golden?
I'm sorry?
How do you explain the golden oldies?
Golden oldies. Boy, you got me there. You got me
Like
there.
going back to the 70s.
Yeah.
This is magazines. Now, this is sort of interesting because we're sort of struggling. We're not having a problem with the left to right dimension. We know that's older and this is younger. Here you've got fitness, entertainment weekly, Bon Appetit. It's a little more. It seems to be a little more active, and at the top you've got things like Fortune, Business Week, a little more formal. Okay, so active, formal, something. You have to try to label these dimensions, and that's what I'm seeing. Yeah.
Do these get overlaid with the correspondence maps at any point?
This is a correspondence map.
But within the context of a
Oh,
media
the-
chat.
oh.
Or, yeah, but in terms of the branding.
So
I suppose you could do that. I
and
suppose you could do that.
Something we used to do as well is
Yeah.
you would take the brand perceptions from the
Right.
correspondence map
Yeah.
and then overlay similar kind of media consumption, whether it was traditional or quote unquote traditional or quote unquote new media. So you get a picture that way of not only what does the brand represent to people, but how do they then engage with it and how can you reach them. I think the interesting bit too is understanding what the category effect is, because you're looking here, for example, Joe, in your example with magazines, Carnival, while you said it was probably a younger cruise line, you're still dealing with magazines that are quote unquote older.
Yeah, that's true. It's the category effect. You're
So
right.
there are category effects that, again, this is where the data is going to lead you so far, but that's where we all have to sort of step in and say, okay, what do I think this means?
It's sort of interesting. Chris and I both worked at Y&R at one point, and there was a study called BAV, Brand Asset Valuator, and we used to get data like this, like the imagery data, like I showed you before. Okay, and we would have the imagery map for brands, and we'd have the imagery map for media, and you could sort of use the imagery map for brand and saying, I want to move the brand in this direction. And then we would cross-reference with the media map and saying, okay, if I want to move the brand in this direction, here are the media properties that I should consider in my media plan, in my media buy. Okay. So it's sort of like they're different. They're not in the same analysis, but they're sort of being used to inform one another. Got it? Okay. Leisure activities. Bars, nightclubs. Live sports events, going to museums, photography, contributing to PBS. Okay.
And are these determined off the same attributes for all of them? Are you actually predetermining the attributes and then applying?
Yeah, I ran the whole analysis once.
Okay.
This way, so I got the brands to stand still. Yeah, they're all in part of the same analysis.
Got it. But so the same attributes are being applied to each of these so leisure activities, magazines,
Yeah.
networks,
Yeah.
and then fall.
Yeah,
Okay.
all at once. Yeah, it's hard to see it all on the same scatter plot, and I figured, it's like, well, let's do it by type of media.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this is new. You've probably all heard of companies like TiVo Analytics or TRA or RentTrack. This is an example of third-party data being merged with set-top box data. Okay. So this is your set-top box data. And this is the name of the households that live in the, this is the names of the households that are in this little panels. They all live on the same block, okay? And what these services are able to do is match the set-top box data with data about the household. Okay. You would go to someone like Experian or Axiom, and what they will do is they will say, okay, the Kogans have an annual household income of 125K. They don't have any kids. They do not own a luxury vehicle, okay, et cetera, et cetera. So the same thing for a Convey family, Divisions, et cetera. So that's an example of a data merge. And beyond the traditional characteristics like household income, incidence of kids, they're now extending to like behavioral databases, like frequent shopper databases. That would be like somebody like dunnhumby, for example, or Shopcom, which is Kantar's data. Car buyer data, Polk, for example, Experian, J.D. Power. Prescription data. There are several companies that offer prescription data, like IMS Health. Creditworthiness, Experian. Okay. Well, and some of them allow access to competitive viewing behaviors. The big issue within the car business is conquest. I'm not as much interested in the people who bought my car last time. I want to go after people. I want people who own a different car to buy me this time. That's conquest. So, for example, if you are Audi, you probably want to go after people who currently own BMWs. Okay. Now, the interesting thing is, in the case of programmatic buying, this type of analysis happens on the fly. You just go to someone who's going to serve your ads, and they're going to use information from companies like Blue Kai or Exalate or someone like that, and they're just going to push the button. So you just have to agree up front who you want to reach, and at that point, it's blind faith. All your ads are going to the right people. Okay? Any questions?
Why can't you do that for every media?
Well, right now you can't do one-on-one targeting for television, for example. Okay.
But you could on the fly, I mean, as in, it doesn't have to, essentially passive media buying, as programmatic allows from the client's perspective.
Yeah.
You could extend the same for any channel. It doesn't have to be active engagement and actively monitored. Right,
Oh, yeah. So, okay, so in this case, this analysis will tell me which are the best networks and programs to reach my target audience. And then I would give that information to my buying department, and they would execute a buy with the networks. Okay? So we use that, that's the way it goes.
That bit is still manual. Right?
Yeah, that part is manual. It's becoming more automated, but it's still pretty manual. Okay. Yes.
Do you have a perspective with programmatic and whether some of the concerns about buying digital in terms of usability or fraudulent impressions and that kind of thing are either better or worse with these programmatic services?
So right now what's happening is there are services that monitor viewability. When we talk about viewability, the MRC, the Media Research Council, has come up with standards which say that, for example, for a display ad, your advertisement has to be, 50% of the pixels have to be visible for at least 1 second. Okay. So these companies can screen for that. They could screen for bot fraud. Like sometimes there are robots who are generating impressions. They have the ability to detect that. I don't know how. They have the ability to detect traffic from out of the country. They have the ability to detect wrong environment. So if like your ad's showing up on a porn site, you don't want that. And so they have the ability to do that, and it becomes part of the cost of serving the ad. So every ad that gets served gets screened, okay? And you may pay a very fraction of a cent for every ad that gets served. But what they're doing is they're screening to be sure it meets all the viewability standards that you've agreed to. And there's, yes,
Are there any pitfalls associated with programmatic buying?
are there pitfalls in the decision to go with programmatic buying?
Yeah. What are the risks? You know, I mean, obviously the rewards are that it's can.
It's, yeah, it's fast, it's a lot, it's less
What are
expensive.
the risks of using it?
Um,
As opposed to a custom ad hoc?
Yeah, custom ad hoc is probably, it's going to be more expensive. You could probably get better positioning with custom buying. So, you know, they talk about having private exchanges for the most desirable spots. Like say in the New York Times, for example, something that's going to have like really, you know, a prominent spot in a New York Times internet page. You would probably want to do that. Privately, as opposed to just going out and blasting out millions of impressions. You know,
You would recommend like using some percentage of your total media buys programmatic just to, you know, and then some other, and allocate, retaining some percentage for custom buys like New York Times?
yeah, I would. Yeah, I think there are situations where you want to have better control over what's taking place. As far as a percentage, I can't answer that. You know, we've been working with things like packaged goods companies where they are just so cost conscious. They just want to buy programmatically, and they seem to be getting decent results in terms of increases in sales. Yeah, yes.
Do we have a loss ratio for programmatic versus custom buying?
Loss ratio. I mean, is it custom buying more expensive?
Yeah, of course it's more expensive,
Yeah,
but it is more targeted and therefore more
Yeah,
effective.
yeah.
So programmatic buying, well, obviously the value, companies which are cost conscious see the
Yeah,
value
yeah,
in it, but from a non-partisan view, what would be the loss ratio of programmatic buying versus custom buying?
So what would be so you're saying, what, you know, what,
I think I understand the question. I think it's like an error function, right, in terms of the missed targeting.
oh yeah, it's big. Yeah, I think it's,
Type
it's big. It's
error.
okay, so targeting error, this is crazy, these are crazy numbers, and they're about 18 months old. But I was in a Nielsen presentation, and they said only about 30% of the impressions were on target. Pretty terrible, huh? Yeah.
And,
About 30%
yeah.
on target, yeah.
So the cost is actually 70% more than actually put.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So is that a number that is considered when you're allocating budgets, that it's 30% effective, let's say?
Yeah. I don't think the buyers look at that. Yeah.
I mean, and again, that's one of the challenges, and for those who were not with us in the fall, I encourage you to go back on our website because we had David Gunzerath, who's the Associate Director from the Media Rating Council, was here talking about viewability, and he gave a great example of what they're seeing through the MRC in their audits about the challenges with a lot of viewability, with about fraud, and certainly with programmatic, there are wide ranges in terms of the ability or the effectiveness of actually hitting target, especially if you're talking about different types of sites, different types of publishers, whether it's retargeted or initial. So there's a lot of variability that goes on. And anybody who's interested in learning more, let me know, and we'll make sure that you've got David's presentation.
Yeah,
It's
that's a
really-
good
it's
idea.
really good.
Yes. Yes.
One more thing about
Yeah.
buying, the way so possibly is the risk, rewards and returns, the risk of weighted versus unweighted analyses. And this obviously weighted analyses, so you're going to be weighting, and it looks like, you know, a ton of people, right? It's 50, 100,000 households, but it's based on 10, 5, actually, in terms of the unweighted underlying sample, right? So is
Oh.
that, how do you deal with that?
I understand that question. What do you think?
So, and I think this is where, you know, again, we talk about anything when we're talking about sample size and doing analysis like that. You've always got to understand what the margin of error is for what you're doing. So clearly, if you're dealing with census type information, because you're dealing with census,
Yeah.
you're not going to have that margin of error. I think the important bit is understanding and being able to capture it in your models.
Right.
How do you ascribe what that error is for any particular
Right.
kind of analysis?
So put it in a sentence. What's the problem that I'm trying to solve for?
So if we're trying to solve for, if we're trying to assess the margin of error
Mm-hmm.
in our marketing mix models when we're dealing with a census versus a small sample size,
Oh.
those are the extremes. And I can say,
Generally,
Joe,
we don't- yeah.
from the client side, when we were dealing with marketing mix work, what we would always do is look at the combination of what the absolute level was as well as the relative. So in that sense, we would end up having to triangulate. And again, not always precise, but it allowed us to at least understand the relative proportion that we were investing in one media type versus another based on that insight. And then we would correct.
Yeah, so within a marketing mix analysis, if there's a big error band around the delivery in one of the media channels, first of all, it would probably be less significant. There would be more uncertainty around the impact that's coming out of the modeling process. One of the things you try to do is you try to do repeated analysis, where instead of doing building models at a national level, you may want to do them at a DMA level or even county level, and that gives you a better understanding of the contribution of the medium, because you've got repeated measurement. It sort of it has some kind of a convergence effect. Just a couple of other, along this idea, there's the whole idea of using first-party data. Some clients are very interested in using first-party data. And that's a case where, you can still do the match, but you miss records because you don't have records about. Not everybody's your customer, More detailed, potentially more current, but it's limited to your own customers, so you don't get the competitive. And then finally, where match rates are poor, data fusion's an option. So this is a case where emerging lookalike households. So they have the same household income and they're just as likely to have kids. And they do or do not own a luxury household, a luxury car. The only difference is they're different households. And what you really want to do is you sort of want to understand the viewing behavior, merging lookalike households, and take a look at what are their media behaviors. Okay. And that's sort of also pretty common.
What are the match rates in this case?
So in this case, whoops, I'm sorry. So this is a case where I wasn't able to match every set-top box with data. So there was no match here, for example, no matching record. I don't have Kelly's not my customer. The Kelly family's not my customer. So I don't know, I can't match that group. So what if instead of being able to match 4 households, I was only able to match 1 household? Wouldn't be that useful.
That's where having a lookalike panel becomes so valuable. So and I think the point here is taking the principle of lookalike targeting and matching from digital and being able to apply it in a TV, particularly when you're dealing with set-top box panels.
So, I hear a lot about people going out and buying impressions all the time. You buy 1 million impressions here, another bunch of impressions there. And the thing you've got to consider is, are you reaching, what's the frequency distribution look like? What proportion of your population are you reaching? Whoops.
David, can you get us to
Next,
that
okay,
chart?
this one, okay. So this is a reach curve. This is a real reach curve for women 25 to 54 for television, okay? And I know it's confusing, so I'm going to ask you just to look at the top line, okay? The top line is the percentage of the population that's been exposed at least one time, okay? And what you want to do is you want to maximize that. But you may not want to, within a 4-week period, you may not want to maximize 1+ reach. You may want to maximize the people that were reached 2 or more times, or 3 or more times. Or you may not want to invest in people, you may not want to spend too much for people being exposed too many times. So what you see here is the number of people that were reached only once. And what you see is at about 100 GRPs, it starts to decrease. Do you know why that's happening? Yeah, what's happening is your next GRP is creating a second exposure. Okay, so it's going from here to the next. It's building the next curve, and that's what's happening. So this is a point at which you're no longer building one reach of once. You're starting to build your second exposure. Okay, so you can do an analysis like this that says if I only want to reach people once, let's make believe this is 1 week. I only have to spend 100 GRPs. Okay, you could do the same analysis with 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. Okay, what you see is the more GRPs you spend, the greater you're building higher and higher frequencies. And you don't want to necessarily build very high frequencies because at some point they become ineffective.
What's the difference between GRP and TRP?
Oh, okay. So I said it was women 25 to 54. This is an old thing. It stands for target rating point. Okay. In the old days, a GRP stood for households. Now GRP is like they say, women 25 to 54 GRPs. It's a TRP. Okay. Now what's happening now is people are being exposed to more and more to commercials, or they're being exposed to video across different screens. And so there are systems that measure exposure across screens. In this case, this is from, I think, X Media. It came out of a presentation from SIM, Project Blueprint. They are able to give you the reach and frequencies for tablet, radio, TV, PC, and smartphone. And that's true for ComScore's X Media, Nielsen Media Impact, Symphony AM's Video Pulse. Okay? So what I'm saying is you just really can't look at the traditional TV by itself. You should start to look at deliveries across platforms. This is real quick. I'm almost done. Stewardship. Accountability. Was the media delivered as purchased? One of the big issues is impressions served versus opportunities to see versus resulting impact, business impact. And this is something that I think in the early days of the internet, everybody assumed, I guess they sort of collapsed the first 2 stages. They considered impressions served to be opportunities to see. And what we've realized over the last few years is that there is a big space, there's a gap between served impressions and impressions that are opportunities to see. Because of things like ad fraud, because ads are being served what's called like below the fold. So before people can actually see the ads, they're gone. So we have to report to our clients each of these stages. How many impressions were served, how many were opportunities to see, and if possible, what is the resulting business impact? And the way that gets done is, at the top, impressions served, servo logs, for example. Opportunities to see. Yes, the ad ran as purchased. Spot wasn't preempted because of something dealing with the New Hampshire election. Ad was viewable. And then econometric modeling can help understand resulting business impact. So that's it for my presentation. I have 1 slide left. And this is just a summary. Media planning process requires a complete understanding of who to reach, best way to reach them. Process usually involves syndicated studies, can involve customer research. Just as plans tend to be multimedia, plan RFs should include individual and combined deliveries.
Meaning reach and frequency.
Yeah,
Okay.
Ad viewability has become an extremely important topic, and advertisers are interested in business returns. Okay. Yes?
Does the ROI measurement consider attribution analysis across the entire, across channels?
Across all
And
channels, yeah.
What time period do you usually consider it?
You know, you could probably do attribution analysis for digital media on a shorter time frame, but when I include everything, I usually include like 2 years of weekly data. Yeah, yeah.
Well, we should basically apply to B2C world. How about B2B world? Do you have like a variation of this framework for B2B?
Yeah, I've done some, I've done some modeling where the sales impact, the sales data is not to the consumer, but to the trade. And it's with drugs, where the drug company is delivering doses to pharmacies and to distributors. Now, the benefit there is that the shelf lives tend to be short. So there isn't that much of a lag between when the product gets shipped from the pharmaceutical company to the distribution channel and then it gets picked up by the consumer. So there are longer lag periods, but the same principles still apply. Yeah. Yes.
Earlier in the session, you mentioned something about simulmedia that you were going to speak about.
That's right.
Oh yeah, we were talking about composition. So Simulmedia is a company that they call themselves a programmatic television company. What you do is you go to Simulmedia and you say, I want to reach people who are in the market for a car, and they're probably going to buy a car that is a luxury car. So what Simulmedia does is they go out and they're able to purchase inventory across networks in shows that deliver to people who are likely to buy luxury cars. So they have databases behind there. They have databases, behavioral databases, and they're able to put together a buy which does the best job of reaching your behavioral target. Okay. They don't usually report out. They report out on GRPs. They don't usually report out on reach and frequency, which is a question I frequently ask. But this is a good way of eliminating a lot of the waste. Okay. Yes.
I think there was a paper that was presented at the ARF a few years ago with David Coltrack and Simulmedia, where they were talking about using the tool to optimize their reach. Was that perhaps in a different context?
That's interesting.
Maybe
Yeah.
to go back and look.
I'd have to, yeah. Okay.
But I know, and again, Dave Morgan, CEO of Several Media, is on our board, and you hear when Dave Morgan talks about, the principles behind it. I mean, the way they're able to, in some respects, basically programmatic within a TV environment, is pretty powerful.
Yeah, and I don't know of anyone who only buys all of their television through Simulmedia. So what you have to do is you have to say, how does this part of my buy contribute to my total TV reach? And I'm not sure how to do that. Yes.
You may be reluctant to answer this question, but this has been a very good overview of sort of the traditional media process, if you will. Where can you speak to sort of the cutting edge right now? What are the breakthrough innovations, if you will, in media research that are happening now or looming on the horizon?
The breakthroughs. Well, we're still talking about cross media. I'm sorry, I just have to turn this off. Okay. It's still cross media. Like Nielsen hasn't delivered its total ratings yet. They just delivered their total ratings, but we're not seeing much. And like everything, all these new products cost money. So it's like clients are being slow to pick up on these new forms of data. Okay. So that's one case. Programmatic TV is starting to pick up speed. Programmatic TV, yeah. This company called Adapt TV, which is owned by AOL. There's a
You mean over-the-top television networks like Hulu, Amazon Prime?
No, this is imagine being able to enter a user interface and say I want to buy so many GRPs to reach this target audience, and then you end up buying across networks. And then what they're selling is in every hour. I don't know how many. Are you all Time Warner, Cablevision? Okay. So so Time Warner Cablevision, they're called MSOs or MVPDs. Every hour they get 2 minutes. Okay, and what they have done is these MVPDs have made a deal with companies like Audience Express, Adapt TV, and there's a handful of others to sell off a portion of that inventory. Okay, so they tend to be local, and what they will do is they will execute your buy, and then within 2 weeks they'll tell you how many people saw your ad. So that's slow it's slow. Then a lot of networks are participating. Not all the networks, but every network has its own 2 minutes. So the audience adds up. It's only 2 minutes per hour, but it adds up. And but it's in local time. So that's pretty much that's what's happening. There are a few other guys that are doing it with local avails. Admore is doing local avails. They claim to be able to do national buys. Yeah. So that's what's going on. Any other questions? Chris, do you want to do the last?
Well,
Last chart is yours.
Joe, we want to thank you for being here today. Wealth of experience, wealth of knowledge, and again, I think what we're seeing is the challenges. I mean, we've talked a lot today about, and we've talked throughout the classes about how analytics can power our insight and our actions. And, as Lauren Morse talked last week, machine learning is really powerful to understand what consumers think or how they react, particularly when they don't have words for it. I think what Joe is able to share with us today is the fact that even when consumers can put words to it, you still need analytics and the power of the statistics behind it to understand how to interpret those words, how to understand consumers' attitudes, their behaviors, their characteristics, the ABCs as you talked about, in order to get smarter media, smarter marketing, and business growth. So, talking about business growth, our last session of the Winter Leadership Lab will be next week. Shelley Ivanko, who's Global Director of Analytics for the Colgate-Palmolive Company, will be here talking about how they use analytics to drive their business growth in toothpaste and in personal cleaning and body wash and soaps and dish liquids around the world. So I encourage you, you don't want to miss it. And one other thing you don't want to miss, a reminder to everybody that our graduation ceremony will be actually on March 3rd. So we've got Shelley February 18th, we've got a break for a week, and then on March 3rd in the evening, it'll be at 5 p.m. at Turner's headquarters in Columbus Circle in the Time Warner Center. More detail to come, but Howard Schimmel, who's the Chief Research Officer of Turner, will share a bit of their experience, what they're doing at Turner in the field of analytics, and then we'll have wine and cheese as well. So it'll be a great time.
Sounds like fun.
So it'll be fun, a lot
That's
of
good.
fun.
Yep.
And with that, if there's nothing else, Dana?
What's the certification and like the testing? When does that happen?
The certificate, how could we forget about exams and tests? So again, the certification will be available starting after Shelley's class. And it'll be available, we'll be sending it to everybody online. And it'll be for that 2-week period from our last class up until our graduation ceremony on the 3rd. And so what we're going to ask people to do is, we haven't figured out the technologies. We're still sorting through whether it's going to be a we mail it, you send it back, or it will be an immediately graded kind of thing. But it'll be on a curve.
Are the questions of the test based on the classes we have taken, or?
Yes. No. The certification test will be based only on our winter session. So starting with Dr. Fu, when he gave his kickoff a few weeks back on Beyond 101, we had Liz talking about Google Analytics, Lauren last week, and of course Joe's session today. So, and with that, the lab is closed. Thank you all for being here today.